The smell of cedar wood hangs in the air as you step through the wide gates of Edo, capital of the Tokugawa shogunate. The year 1850. The city is vast, streets thrumming with vendors selling rice cakes, silks, fish drying on bamboo racks, paper lanterns swinging in the evening breeze. Samurai walk proudly through the lanes, hand resting lightly on the hilts of their swords. They have ruled Japan for more than 200 years, the backbone of an order so strict that even the shuffle of peasant sandals is dictated by law. And yet, as you stand in the heart of this order, you feel it, tension, unease, the first cracks in a system long thought unshakable. Tokugawa rule had endured since the early 1600s, a time of wars and chaos finally silenced by shogunal authority. For centuries, Japan lived in relative peace under their iron grip. The islands remained closed to foreigners, save for a single Dutch trading post at Nagasaki. Rice taxes filled the coffers, and samurai maintained their privileges as hereditary warriors. But peace, ironically, was the samurai's undoing. With no wars to fight, many became bureaucrats, their sword symbols more than weapons, their stipends eroded by inflation. The once fearsome warrior class now shuffled papers, patrolled streets and taught calligraphy. Their honor remained intact in name, but their power was slowly draining away. Meanwhile, the outside world was changing with terrifying speed. Steamships crossed oceans in weeks, not months. Cannons mounted on iron hulls shattered wooden defenses. Western empires expanded into Asia, carving up China, looming over Korea, and Japan, clinging to its isolationist policy known as Sakoku, became a tempting target, a land of rice, silk, and harbors that could resupply foreign navies. Inside Edo's palaces, the shogunate debated endlessly, but each year the world pressed closer. The samurai may not have realized it yet, but their age of dominance was already trembling on its foundations. In the tea houses of Edo, whispers carried faster than official proclamations. Merchants muttered about falling rice values and debts unpaid by impoverished samurai. Farmers groaned under harsh taxes, struggling to survive as famine swept the countryside. Discontent simmered, not only among commoners but even within the samurai class itself. The proud warriors felt humiliated, bound by duty to a shogun who seemed increasingly out of touch. Their stipends shrinking while merchants once despised grew wealthy through trade. The balance of power that had defined Japan for centuries was tilting, and it left the warrior class restless, uneasy, and divided. And then came the ships. Black smoke on the horizon, sails replaced by towering funnels belching steam, cannons glinting in the sun. To the fishermen of Edo Bay, it must have seemed like demons rising from the sea. The Tokugawa leaders could not stop them. Their coastal defenses were designed for pirates, not industrial navies. The mere sight of these vessels was enough to reveal how fragile their rule truly was. The samurai, trained for centuries in swordsmanship and archery, could do nothing against steel armor and explosive shells. The very image of invincibility, the bedrock of the shogunate, had been shattered without a single shot fired. But even before Commodore Perry's black ships officially anchored in 1853, the tremors were being felt. Reports filtered in through the Dutch that Britain had seized Hong Kong, that France had subdued Vietnam, that the Opium Wars had reduced mighty China to humiliation. Samurai in remote domains pored over these accounts, their brows furrowed in anger and fear. Was Japan next? Could the Tokugawa protect the nation, or had centuries of peace left them defenseless? These questions whispered through every dojo, every castle hall, every marketplace. For many samurai, the crisis was existential. Their entire identity was built on serving as the sword of the shogun, guardians of a stable order. But what if that order was no longer stable? What if the shogun himself was too weak to defend Japan from foreign powers? Loyalty, the very heart of samurai code, began to split. Some still clung to tradition, vowing to defend Tokugawa rule even against impossible odds. Others began to murmur of a new source of legitimacy. The emperor, long a ceremonial figure in Kyoto, but increasingly seen as a pure symbol of Japanese unity. You walk through a crowded marketplace, hearing two low-ranking samurai arguing. One insists that loyalty to the shogun is absolute. that abandoning the Tokugawa would dishonor their ancestors. The other shakes his head, voice low but firm, saying the emperor must lead if Japan is to survive the onslaught of foreign powers. Their words hang heavy in the air. Once, such dissent would have been unthinkable. Now, it is spreading like wildfire. Economics sharpen the blade of discontent. With stipends fixed in rice and rice values declining, many samurai were sinking into poverty. They pawned family heirlooms, borrowed from merchants they once despised, even took jobs as teachers or guards just to survive. Pride clashed with desperation. Imagine a warrior whose ancestors fought at Sekigahara now reduced begging a rice merchant for credit. The humiliation ate at the class from within, corroding the very foundation of their honor. And all the while, the Tokugawa court in Edo staggered between paralysis and denial. Some advisors urged reform, modernize the army, open ports cautiously, buy Western weapons. Others insisted on clinging to tradition, expel the foreigners, preserve the sacred isolation. The indecision was fatal. Each month, wasted widened the cracks, weakened the aura of Tokugawa authority, and left the samurai drifting in uncertainty. You pass a group of young warriors training in a dusty courtyard. Their katanas gleam, their movements precise, every stroke echoing centuries of discipline. But behind their graceful strikes lies futility. What use is a blade against cannons? Their art, their pride, their very identity faces extinction. And though they do not speak it aloud, you can see it in their eyes. Fear and a hunger for new purpose. By the year 1850, the storm had already gathered. The economy faltered, the merchants gained power, the samurai slipped into debt, and the shogunate teetered between worlds it could no longer control. Peace had eroded the warrior spirit, and foreign guns now threatened the gates. The samurai stood at a crossroads, their future uncertain, their honor intact, but their swords suddenly fragile in a world of steam and steel. The fall of the samurai had not yet come, but the first stones were already tumbling. Each whisper of dissent, each glimpse of foreign ships, each samurai forced to pawn his blade, all were cracks in the great wall of Tokugawa rule. And you, walking through Edo's crowded lanes, can already feel the weight of history shifting. The order that had lasted for centuries is faltering, and in its shadow something new waits to be born. The samurai do not yet know it, but the world they defend so fiercely has already begun to slip away. The year is 1853, and the sun beats hard against the waters of Edo Bay. Fishermen squint across the horizon, hands raised to shield their eyes, their hearts racing as dark shapes appear against the shimmering line of sea and sky. At first, the villagers think they are storms, mountains moving where none should be. But soon the truth becomes unavoidable. Ships enormous and unnatural, sailing not with wind-filled cloth but propelled by smoke and fire. They are black-hulled, iron-clad beasts that belch soot into the heavens. The Japanese call them kurofune, the black ships. In their shadows, the age-old pride of the samurai shudders like a paper lantern in a storm. The commander of these vessels is an American named Commodore Matthew Perry, sent by the United States to demand that Japan open its ports. He comes not as a guest, but as a force of nature, carrying the authority of a nation already drunk on expansion and industrial might. The cannons lining his decks gleam in the sunlight, and his ships anchor boldly in Japanese waters without fear of reprisal. For more than 2 centuries under the policy of Sakoku, Japan has closed itself off from the world. Only the Dutch and the Chinese have been permitted restricted trade through Nagasaki under the vigilant eyes of Tokugawa officials. To the Americans, and soon to the Europeans, this isolation is intolerable. Japan must open, and Perry has arrived to see it done. Onshore, the samurai stand motionless, their hands resting on the hilts of their swords, their armor polished, their banners flying. Yet their confidence falters. For what good are blades, no matter how sharp, against ironclad ships armed with cannons that can hurl death across miles? The warriors of Japan, proud heirs of centuries of discipline and valor, find themselves suddenly rendered obsolete. The psychological blow is staggering. Their honor is intact, but honor does not stop cannonballs. Inside Edo Castle, panic ripples through the corridors. The shogunate, already weakened by economic decay and factional disputes, now faces an external threat it cannot confront with force. Advisors debate endlessly. Some demand that Perry be expelled immediately, even if it means war. Others, more cautious, insist that negotiation is the only path, for to fight is to invite annihilation. The shogun himself, Tokugawa Ieyasu, sick and weary, struggles to make a decision. He sends envoys to meet Perry, bearing gifts, apologies, and excuses. But Perry is unmoved. He insists he will return the next year with more ships, and if Japan does not open, those cannons will speak for him. Word spreads quickly, not only among the samurai but also among peasants, artisans, and merchants. Some are awestruck by the foreign vessels, marveling at their size and power. Others feel only dread, as though the gods themselves have abandoned Japan. Among the warrior class, the shame burns deepest. For centuries, they have seen themselves as the shield of the nation, the keepers of order and protectors of the land. But when confronted with the black ships, they can do nothing but stand and stare. The humiliation sears their souls. And humiliation, for a samurai, is unbearable. A warrior may accept defeat in battle, but to be powerless without even striking a blow, that is a disgrace beyond words. Many mutter bitterly about the shogunate's weakness. What good is a shogun who cannot protect his people? What loyalty is owed to a ruler who allows foreigners to dictate terms at sword point? Slowly, dangerously, the unquestioned allegiance to the Tokugawa begins to erode. Perry returns in 1854, this time with even more ships, their guns casting long shadows across the waters. The shogunate, unable to resist, signs the Treaty of Kanagawa, opening 2 ports to American vessels. Soon after, other Western nations follow, extracting treaties of their own, each one a fresh wound to Japanese pride. Unequal treaties they are called, for they favour the foreigners at every turn, granting them trade rights, low tariffs, and immunity from Japanese law. In the tea houses and markets of Edo, voices rise in anger. Among the samurai, fury blazes. For the warriors, the treaties are not simply political concessions. They are insults. They strip Japan of its dignity, and by extension strip the samurai of theirs. How can a class sworn to defend the nation's honor accept such humiliation? Some vow to expel the foreigners at any cost, rallying under the cry of Sono Joi, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. Others, more pragmatic, argue that Japan must modernize, that to survive in this new world it must learn from the very nations it despises. The rift grows wider, splitting domains, families, and friendships. You walk through Kyoto, once the imperial capital, and hear young samurai preaching in the streets. Their voices are fierce, their faces are light with passion. They denounce the shogunate as weak, corrupt, and dishonorable. They declare that the emperor must lead Japan's revival, that the foreigners must be driven out, that the spirit of the warrior must be reborn in fire and blood. These words carry weight, especially among the restless lower-ranking samurai whose stipends have dwindled to nothing. They dream of glory, of proving their worth, of restoring honor to their name. Yet the irony is sharp. To expel the foreigners requires weapons as powerful as theirs, and to gain such weapons, Japan must first embrace the very modernization it resists. It is a paradox that will define the era. Samurai calling for the destruction of Western influence, even as they adopt Western rifles, cannons, and tactics to achieve it. The black ships have not only forced open Japan's ports, they have forced open its mind, dragging the samurai into a new age where swords and armor can no longer hold the line. The streets of Edo grow restless. Riots flare as prices rise and taxes bite harder. Samurai, once proud and aloof, now walk side by side with peasants in protest, united by common anger against both shogunate weakness and foreign arrogance. The city smells of smoke and sweat, of resentment simmering to a boil. Assassinations begin. Foreigners cut down in the streets, shogunate officials stabbed in alleys, their killers vanishing into the crowd with the cry of Joe on their lips. The old order bleeds from within. By the late 1850s, the death knell is clear. The black ships have done more than open Japan. They have exposed the rot at the heart of Tokugawa rule. Samurai, who once lived only to serve, now question whom they serve. and why. Domains like Satsuma and Choshu begin to train with Western weapons, forging alliances that will soon shake the nation. The balance of centuries is tipped, and nothing, not swords, not silence, not tradition, can restore it. As you stand once more on the shores of Edo Bay, watching the smoke drift above Perry's ironclads, the truth is undeniable. The fall of the samurai has begun, not in battle, but in the shame of helplessness, in the sight of foreign power overwhelming centuries of pride. Their swords are still sharp, their armor still polished, but in their hearts the knowledge is bitter. The world has changed, and the old ways can no longer protect them. The black ships have sailed into Japan, and with them they carry the future. The smoke from the black ships has barely settled, and already Japan is gripped by an argument that threatens to split the nation in two. It is not simply about trade, nor about treaties, but about identity, who the Japanese are, and who has the right to decide their future. The question strikes hardest at the very heart of the warrior class. Should foreigners be embraced for their technology, or expelled to preserve the purity of Japan? The samurai, bound by honor and tradition, find themselves pulled violently in opposite directions. In Edo's corridors of power, Tokugawa officials shuffle through endless meetings, their lacquered screens hiding the nervous sweat on their brows. Some insist the treaties signed with America and Europe are humiliations that must be undone. Others argue that modernization is unavoidable, that Japan must adapt to survive. Yet every voice is tinged with fear. To defy the foreigners risks war, and the fate of China and the Opium Wars is too fresh a memory to ignore. But to accept them means betraying centuries of isolation, an abandonment of the very policy that defined Tokugawa legitimacy. Paralysis seeps into every decision, and with paralysis comes weakness. The emperor in Kyoto, long reduced to a ceremonial figure under the shadow of the shogun, suddenly finds himself a beacon for dissent. Among the younger samurai, especially those from discontented domains far from Edo, the cry grows louder. So no Yai, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians. The slogan spreads like fire through the ranks of frustrated warriors. For them, it is both a patriotic call to arms and a declaration of contempt for the shogunate. The emperor becomes more than a symbol of tradition. He becomes a rallying point for resistance. Travel to Choshu in the southwest, and you hear voices sharper still. Young samurai there, hungry for purpose, rail against Tokugawa weakness. They practice with their swords by day and plot assassinations by night. To them, the presence of foreigners is an insult, and the shogunate's compliance is treason. In the alleys of Kyoto, their blades flash. Foreign traders are cut down, shogunate officials ambushed, reformist voices silenced. Blood stains the cobblestones, and the air of the city becomes charged with fear. Samurai, once guardians of order, now tear the fabric of society apart. But not all agree. In domains like Satsuma, pragmatic leaders argue that to fight the foreigners with swords is suicide. Better to learn from them, buy their rifles, copy their cannons, and train soldiers in their tactics. These men see modernization not as betrayal, but as strategy. They send envoys abroad, hire foreign engineers, and quietly prepare for the day when Japan might stand on equal footing with the West. To their critics, they look like collaborators. To history, they will look like visionaries. The samurai, however, are not united. In Edo, conservative warriors cling desperately to the old ways, sharpening their katanas, believing that devotion and discipline will overcome foreign steel. They despise their fellows in Satsuma and Choshu, calling them traitors to the spirit of Japan. Meanwhile, reformist samurai sneer at the old guard, dismissing them as fools clinging to ghosts. Brotherhood fractures, and suspicion grows. Every dojo, every clan, becomes a battlefield of ideas. You wander the streets of Kyoto at dusk, and the tension is palpable. Lanterns glow faintly in doorways, but the alleys are dark and dangerous. You hear whispers of another assassination, another enemy of the emperor, cut down by fanatical blades. The air smells of blood and incense, of old traditions colliding with new fury. The people huddle in their homes, fearful of both the foreigners and their own supposed protectors. It is a city where every footstep feels watched, every shadow conceals a hand on a sword hilt. Among the commoners, confusion reigns. Farmers wonder why their taxes grow heavier while samurai bicker about honor. Merchants, who profit from new foreign trade, are caught between wealth and fear of reprisal. Artisans craft goods for foreigners while praying they are not labeled traitors. The common people, long ruled without question, now find themselves pawns in a war of ideology they barely understand. The irony is sharp. Samurai who once stood as the model of order now embody chaos. They strike from shadows, kill in the name of purity, and drag Japan closer to civil war. Yet, in their fury lies the raw energy of a class that refuses to fade quietly. The fall of the samurai will not be a gentle surrender. It will be violent, desperate, and drenched in both pride and blood. Inside Edo Castle, the shogunate trembles. Every decision is challenged, every decree ignored. Assassins strike openly in Kyoto, foreign envoys lodge protests, and the emperor's court grows bolder in its defiance. The shogun's retainers try to project confidence, their swords polished, their armor gleaming. But beneath the surface, doubt corrodes their strength. They are warriors without a clear enemy, leaders without control, guardians of a system unraveling under their feet. You step into a dojo one evening, watching young men drill with both swords and rifles. Their instructor, a seasoned samurai, switches effortlessly between kenjutsu and musket drills, his face grim. The sight is jarring. Tradition and modernity colliding in the same room, blades and bullets side by side. The lesson is clear. Japan can no longer choose one path. It must walk both, however contradictory, or perish altogether. And here's your cheeky thought. Imagine the debates. The sword is the soul of the samurai, one cries, clutching his katana. Yes, says another, hefting a rifle. But the bullet doesn't care about your soul. The argument, centuries old, now takes on deadly urgency. By the late 1850s, the fractures have become fault lines. The shogunate's legitimacy is questioned openly. The emperor's name is invoked as a battle cry. Domains act with increasing independence, buying weapons, training armies, ignoring Edo's commands. The samurai, once the single unquestioned backbone of the nation, are now divided into factions sharpening their blades for war. And so you stand, once more, in the streets of Kyoto. As night falls, the lanterns flicker, the temples loom in silence, and the footsteps of assassins echo faintly on the cobblestones. The debate is no longer confined to words. It has become bloodshed, and in that blood, the old order of the Tokugawa begins to drown. The samurai are not yet fallen, but in their divided loyalties and furious debates, you see the truth. They are no longer masters of their destiny. The age of unquestioned honor is ending. The age of civil war is about to begin. The year is 1863, and the air in Kyoto feels heavy with smoke, rumor, and fear. You walk the narrow streets at dusk, lanterns swaying above your head, the scent of incense mixing with the sharper tang of blood not yet washed from the stones. The cry of Suno Jai, revere the emperor, expel the barbarians, rings through the alleys, shouted by young samurai with hands never far from their sword hilts. The city, once a center of quiet temples and imperial rituals, has become a furnace of rebellion. The domains of Satsuma and Shoshu are the most restless. These powerful regions in the southwest are tired of bowing to the Tokugawa shogunate, whose weakness in the face of foreign gunboats has humiliated the nation. In the halls of Satsuma's castles, leaders like Shimazu Hisamitsu quietly arm their men with rifles, bought from Britain, even as they preach loyalty to the emperor. In Shoshu, men like Takasugi Shinsaku train ragtag bands of samurai, peasants and merchants together, breaking centuries of hierarchy to create militias that fight with guns and cannon instead of bows and swords. Change is coming, and the leaders of these domains are not asking Edo for permission. The shogunate senses the danger and tries desperately to reassert control. Troops march into Kyoto, banners unfurled, spears gleaming in the sunlight. They patrol the city gates, hunt down assassins, and declare their loyalty to both the emperor and the shogun. Yet the very act of trying to control Kyoto reveals how fragile their power has become. For centuries, the emperor was little more than a figurehead, but now his name has become a weapon sharper than any katana. Whoever claims to act in the emperor's interest gains legitimacy. Whoever does not is branded a traitor. The shogun is supposed to be the emperor's protector. Now, more and more, he looks like his prisoner. Tensions explode in the summer heat. In 1863, samurai from Choshu march into Kyoto to seize influence over the emperor's court. Their arrival sparks chaos, as rival domains clash in the streets and alleys. The shogunate responds with force, allying with Satsuma to drive the Choshu men out in what becomes known as the Kinmon incident. Smoke fills the skies as cannons thunder within sight of the imperial palace itself. Wooden houses splinter, blood stains the riverbanks, and the capital trembles as Japanese fight Japanese in the name of the emperor they all claim to honor. The irony is bitter. Samurai, bound by codes of loyalty and honor, now cut each other down in civil war. Brothers from different domains face one another across barricades, their cries of patriotism indistinguishable even as they kill in opposite causes. The people of Kyoto cower behind paper screens as the sounds of gunfire echo through the night, wondering how the guardians of order became its destroyers. And yet, as the smoke clears, it is not the shogunate that grows stronger. Each clash reveals their weakness, their inability to command true loyalty. Satsuma and Choshu, once enemies, begin to realize they share a common goal: the overthrow of the Tokugawa system itself. Out of blood and betrayal, alliances are forged that will soon reshape the nation. By 1866, a secret pact binds Satsuma and Choshu together. Its architect is Sakamoto Ryama, a wandering samurai from Tosa, who dreams of a modern Japan free from shogunal chains. He brokers the impossible, convincing ancient rivals to unite. The agreement is whispered in back rooms, sealed with handshakes and sake. It is the birth of the coalition that will topple centuries of Tokugawa power. Meanwhile, the shogunate tries to fight modernization with modernization. They purchase French rifles, hire Western advisors, and attempt to build a navy to match their enemies. But every step comes too late, hampered by corruption, hesitation, and the crushing weight of tradition. The reforms appear desperate rather than decisive, and each new failure erodes confidence further. The samurai, once loyal to the shogun, begin drifting away, drawn instead to the fire of Satsuma and Choshu's cause. In the streets of Edo, the tension grows unbearable. Merchants whisper of higher taxes and strange new weapons. Farmers mutter of being forced into militias against their will. Even the lower-ranking samurai, once loyal, now seethe at their stipend shrinking while their leaders indulge in endless debates. The shogunate looks less like a shield and more like a crumbling wall. The authority that once seemed eternal now feels brittle as old rice paper, ready to tear at the next blow. And here's your cheeky thought. Imagine the gossip. Have you heard? Choshu's training peasants with guns. One samurai sneers, horrified. Another shrugs. Well, at least the peasants don't pawn their swords every week. The sarcasm is bitter, but it hides a truth. Old hierarchies are breaking, and the warrior class is no longer untouchable. The emperor himself, though still cloaked in ceremonial robes, becomes a living symbol of resistance. Young Meiji, barely more than a boy, inherits a throne long denied real power, yet his very presence inspires reformists. Samurai who would never have dared speak against the shogun now speak loudly of loyalty to the throne. The name of the emperor becomes a rallying cry not just for tradition, but for revolution. In every corner of Japan, the ground shakes. Domains line up for or against the Tokugawa. Samurai sharpen their blades, clean their rifles, whisper oaths of loyalty to causes that contradict one another. And through it all, ordinary people feel the tremors in rising prices, in sudden raids, in the sight of warriors marching under unfamiliar banners. The fall of the samurai is not a single clash of swords, nor a single treaty signed in haste. It is a slow unravelling, each thread tugged loose by foreign cannons, domestic corruption, and the fiery ambitions of restless warriors. By the late 1860s, that unravelling has become impossible to ignore. The shogunate still stands, its palaces tall, its armies armed, but already you can hear the timbers creaking. You stand at the edge of Kyoto once more, the mountains dark against the night sky, the city below flickering with the glow of lanterns and smouldering ruins. The sound of distant drums carries across the fields, the marching of men preparing for another clash. The air smells of powder and smoke, the stench of a nation tearing itself apart. The final collapse of Tokugawa power is not yet written, but you can feel it approaching, as inevitable as dawn. The samurai are still here, still proud, still fierce, but now they fight not for unity, but for competing visions of Japan's soul, and in their division lies the certainty of their fall. The winter of 1868 settles heavy over Japan. The skies grey, the air sharp, and the land trembling on the edge of civil war. In Kyoto, banners snap in the cold wind as troops gather outside the city. On one side stand the men of the Tokugawa shogunate, disciplined samurai in their thousands, their armor polished, their flags bearing the crest of a power that has ruled unchallenged for 2.5 centuries. On the other side, the allied domains of Satsuma, Choshu, and Tosa, their warriors armed not only with swords but also with modern rifles, artillery, and the dangerous fire of conviction. The stage is set for the Boshin War, and you find yourself standing in the midst of it as history tips from order into chaos. The shogunate has not come to Kyoto willingly. In late 1867, Shogun Tokugawa Yoshinobu, weary and uncertain, formally returned governing power to the emperor, hoping to preserve Tokugawa prestige by yielding gracefully. But the gesture did not save him. Reformist samurai, emboldened by their new coalition, rejected the compromise. They demanded the complete dismantling of Tokugawa authority. Yoshinobu, proud yet cornered, gathered his loyalists and prepared to march against Kyoto, determined to reassert his family's power one last time. Thus armies assemble near the small villages of Toba and Fushimi, south of the imperial capital. The contrast between them is stark. The Tokugawa bring numbers, 15,000 troops, banners fluttering, their commanders confident in the weight of tradition. But the Satsuma and Choshu men bring firepower. European cannons and American rifles glint in the pale sun, their soldiers drilled in Western tactics, their commanders hardened by years of defiance against Edo. And crucially, they march under the name of the emperor. Their banners declare them the true defenders of Japan, and in a world where legitimacy matters as much as weapons, that single claim tilts the balance of loyalty. The first shots are fired on January 27, 1868. Smoke rolls across the fields as cannons roar. Tokugawa troops advance with swords drawn, their courage unshaken, their honor unflinching, but honor cannot stop bullets. Lines of modern rifles crack in unison, and men fall in waves, their armor offering no protection. The battlefield echoes with the clash of centuries, the cry of samurai charging with katanas, met by the thunder of Western artillery. You watch the old world and the new collide, steel against steel, gunpowder against tradition. The smell of blood mixes with powder smoke, choking the air. As the fighting intensifies, confusion spreads among the Tokugawa ranks. Rumors ripple through their lines. The emperor himself has sanctioned the attack. To fight on is to risk not only death, but dishonor. Samurai who have pledged lifelong loyalty to the shogun suddenly hesitate, unwilling to be branded as enemies of the throne. Some break ranks, others surrender outright. Within days, the Tokugawa army, despite its size, crumbles in retreat. The Battle of Toba Fushimi is over, and with it the illusion of Tokugawa invincibility. Edo itself lies vulnerable. The city, teeming with merchants, artisans, and samurai families, waits in dread as imperial forces march east. Panic spreads in the streets. Some samurai cling to their swords, vowing to defend the city to the last breath. Others quietly pack their belongings, fearing that resistance will only bring ruin. Commoners whisper nervously in the markets, "Will Edo burn as Kyoto did? Will the city that has stood as the heart of Tokugawa power be reduced to ash?" But in a remarkable twist, bloodshed is avoided. Through careful negotiation, led in part by the reformist diplomatic Katsu Kaishu and the imperial commander Saigo Takamori, Edo surrenders peacefully in the spring of 18. The gates of the city open, and imperial banners are raised above Tokugawa castles, without a battle. The people breathe easier, the city is spared, but the meaning is unmistakable. The Tokugawa shogunate, unbroken for more than 2 centuries, has fallen. Yet the war is far from over. Loyalists to the Tokugawa cause refuse to accept defeat. They retreat north, gathering in the snowy provinces of Tohoku and eventually to Hokkaido, where they establish the short-lived Republic of Ezo. There, on the windswept island, they attempt to forge a new government in defiance of imperial power. Their leaders, seasoned samurai and naval officers, cling fiercely to their honor. They build fortifications, raise flags, and prepare to fight to the bitter end. It is a final echo of the old world, a desperate stand against the tide of modernity. In Hokkaido, cannons thunder once more as imperial ships bombard rebel positions. Snow falls thick on the ground, blood steaming in the cold air. The samurai of Ezo fight with ferocity, their blades flashing even as bullets cut them down. They know their cause is doomed, but surrender is unthinkable. The fall of their republic is inevitable, but it is also defiant, a testament to the warrior spirit that refuses to vanish quietly. By 1869, the rebellion is crushed, and with it, the last military resistance of the Tokugawa loyalists. The consequences are profound. The Emperor Meiji, now advised by reformists from Satsuma and Choshu, declares the restoration of imperial rule. In truth, power lies in the hands of these victorious domains. But the symbol is powerful. The age of the shogunate is ended, the age of the emperor has begun, and for the samurai, the meaning is devastating. Their role, once unquestioned, is now uncertain. They are no longer the sword of the shogun. They are subjects of a state that values rifles over katanas, cannons over armor, modern armies over hereditary warriors. And yet, as you stand among the ruins of battlefields and the quiet streets of Edo, you sense that the samurai do not vanish overnight. Their pride lingers, their traditions endure, their honor still burns. But it burns in a world that has shifted beneath their feet. The Boshin War has revealed a truth no blade can deny. The old ways cannot withstand the march of modernity. Here's your cheeky thought. Imagine a samurai explaining this to his ancestors. We charged bravely, but they had guns that fired 20 shots a minute. His grandfather would probably scowl and say, then you should have trained harder. Even in defeat, pride clings stubbornly, but pride does not reload a rifle. The fall of Edo, the rise of the emperor, the clash of old and new, all of it marks the turning point. The shogunate is gone, the samurai stand adrift, and Japan begins its sprint into a new age. The war is over, but for the warriors, the true battle, the battle for identity, has only just begun. The guns of the Boshin War fall silent in 1869, yet the echoes carry far beyond the battlefield. Across Japan, the banners of the new imperial government rise above castles once loyal to the Tokugawa. Roads bustle with troops in Western uniforms, their rifles gleaming, their drills precise, and in Kyoto, the young Emperor Meiji emerges as a symbol of national renewal, his authority freshly forged in fire and victory. The shogunate is gone, but something deeper has shifted. The samurai, long the backbone of Japan, now find themselves uncertain of their place in this new world. For centuries, loyalty to the Tokugawa had defined their purpose. Samurai were retainers, protectors, administrators, warriors. Their lives revolved around duty to their lords, and their honor was measured by service. Now the Tokugawa house has fallen, and the emperor has become the supreme figure of power. For some, this is a source of pride, a return to a purer loyalty that predates the shogunate. For others, it is a wound. The oath they swore to their shogun is broken, not by death in battle, but by the stroke of politics. They are left adrift, their duty redirected by decree rather than by choice. The imperial government, led by reformist leaders from Satsuma and Choshu, wastes no time reshaping the nation. Castles are repurposed as government offices, domains are reorganized, and the centuries-old system of feudal lords is dismantled. Samurai still hold rank, still carry their swords, but they sense the erosion beneath their feet. Their stipends, once guaranteed in rice, are increasingly difficult for the new state to maintain. Merchants prosper from the opening of foreign trade, but many samurai sink deeper into debt, their pride bruised as they borrow from those they once scorned. Kyoto itself reflects the transformation. Where once the streets echoed with the clip of wooden sandals and the hushed authority of samurai patrols, now they hum with new sounds, the whistle of steam engines, the clang of foreign-built forges, the chatter of merchants dealing in goods from across the seas. Samurai walk stiffly through the crowds, their katanas still at their sides, but their presence no longer commands the same respect. A peasant with a rifle may be more valuable than a warrior with a blade. You walk past a tea house one evening and overhear two middle-ranking samurai in bitter conversation. "We fought to restore the emperor," one mutters, gripping his sword, "but now they speak of abolishing our stipends, as if our service meant nothing." The other nods grimly. We are relics in their eyes. They take our loyalty, but they have no need of our swords. Their voices carry the weight of a class sensing extinction, their pride battling despair. The discontent deepens in rural domains. Many lower-ranking samurai, once barely surviving on meager stipends, now face outright ruin as the government delays or reduces payments. Some turn to teaching, opening small schools where they drill students in Confucian texts or swordsmanship. Others pawn their armor, their swords, even family heirlooms, trading honor for rice. A few abandon their status altogether, taking up farming or trade. Each choice is painful, each one a reminder that the world they knew is dissolving around them. And yet, for every samurai sinking into bitterness, there are others who adapt. Reformist leaders like Seigo Takamori and Okubo Toshimichi urge their fellows to see loyalty to the emperor as the ultimate expression of the warrior's code. They argue that Japan's survival depends on modernization, that samurai must lead not by the sword but by guiding the nation into a new era. Samurai become administrators, soldiers in Western-style armies, and diplomats abroad. Some thrive, their talents given new outlets in the machinery of the modern state. The contrast grows sharper by the day. In the barracks of the new imperial army, young men of every class train together, their uniforms indistinguishable, their ranks determined by merit rather than birth. The sight is shocking to traditional samurai, peasants drilling with rifles, merchants' sons commanding squads, the rigid hierarchy of centuries dissolving under the demands of modern warfare. For a samurai who once defined his worth by the sword at his waist, the humiliation cuts deep. And here's your cheeky thought. Imagine the conversations. "My grandfather fought at Sekigahara," a proud samurai proclaims. A conscript smirks back. "And mine just beat you at rifle practice." Pride may burn hot, but bullets fly straighter than lineage. The emperor's name, once distant and ceremonial, now looms over every reform. Samurai are urged to see themselves not as retainers of lords, but as servants of the state, bound to the throne. The idea is radical, loyalty to a single central figure rather than to countless feudal domains. For centuries, samurai lived and died for their daimyo. Now they are told to die for a nation. It is a shift as monumental as any battle, and for many it feels like a betrayal of their ancestors. In Edo, now renamed Tokyo, the eastern capital, the changes are even more dramatic. Western-style buildings rise, gas lamps flicker along new streets, and foreigners stroll openly through quarters once forbidden to them. Samurai stare at them with suspicion, their hands twitching on their sword hilts. But their blades remain sheathed. The government forbids attacks, and punishments are swift. The age of the street assassin is fading. The warrior must adapt or vanish. The bitterness does not fade quietly. Across Japan, small uprisings erupt, led by disillusioned samurai who cannot stomach the erosion of their privileges. They gather in remote villages, polish their armor, sharpen their swords, and proclaim their loyalty to the old ways. But each rebellion is crushed, their blades shattered by rifles, their ideals drowned in gunfire. The message is cruel but clear. The samurai's era of dominance has ended. Yet in the whispers of the defeated, in the pride that still burns in their eyes, you sense that this story is not finished. They may be relics, but they will not disappear without one last blaze of defiance. The fall of the samurai will not be a gentle fading into memory. It will come with rebellion, tragedy, and blood. As you walk through Kyoto once more, the temples loom silent, their bells echoing in the cold air. the samurai still walk the streets, their swords glinting, their posture proud, but beneath the surface, they are ghosts, warriors of a world already gone, searching desperately for a place in one being born without them. The Boshin War has ended, the emperor has risen, and the old order has collapsed. The question now is not whether the samurai will fall, but how and when, and with what final cry. The year is 1868, and Japan trembles under the weight of victory and defeat. The shogunate lies broken, its banners torn down from Edo Castle, its armies scattered across the countryside. Yet the end of Tokugawa rule is not the end of conflict. Across the empire, old loyalties burn like embers, and the warriors who once swore fealty to the shogun now face a question deeper than politics. What does it mean to be a samurai in a world without a shogun? The Boshin War, though decisive, has left scars. In villages across the north, loyalists to the Tokugawa cause refuse to yield. They paint their banners black, polish their swords, and march into battle one last time. Some join the Aizu domain, where samurai families dig in behind castle walls, determined to resist the imperial army. The siege of Aizu is brutal. Cannon fire pounds wooden gates to splinters, flames consume rice storehouses, and women and children huddle in basements as shells thunder above them. Yet the defenders fight on, swords flashing even as bullets rip through their ranks. Among them are the Byakutai, the White Tiger Corps, teenage samurai sworn to protect their homeland. Barely 15 or 16, they charge into battle with desperate courage, their blades no match for imperial rifles. When their castle falls and smoke rises into the sky, a band of these youths believe their families are dead, their honor lost. In despair, they kneel together on a hillside and take their own lives. Their sacrifice becomes legend, a haunting symbol of loyalty in a world that no longer needs it. Further north, in the bitter winds of Hokkaido, Tokugawa loyalists carve out one last refuge. Led by naval officers like Enomoto Takeaki, they proclaim the Republic of Ezo, a new government modelled on Western lines, but defended by the spirit of the samurai. Their flag flies over Akudai, their ships patrol the icy seas, and their soldiers, clad in a mix of armour and uniforms, prepare for the inevitable clash. It is a strange fusion of old and new, samurai ideals wrapped in the trappings of modern republics. The imperial army, relentless, sails north to meet them. In the spring of 1869, the Battle of Hakodate erupts. Snow crunches underfoot as cannon smoke hangs heavy in the air. Samurai charge bravely down hillsides, their swords raised high, only to be cut down by rifle fire. Naval battles rage in the bay, wooden ships burning under modern artillery. The Republic's dream dies in the thunder of guns, its leaders captured, its banners torn. Yet even in defeat, the defiance of Ezo lingers, remembered as the final stand of the old order. You walk the battlefield afterward, the snow-stained red, the air thick with silence. Broken swords lie scattered beside rifles, armor cracked beside modern shells. It is not just a battle lost, it is a way of life extinguished. The samurai fought with the valor of their ancestors, but valor could not overcome gunpowder. Their fall is not dishonor, but inevitability. Back in Kyoto and Tokyo, the victors declare the dawn of a new age. The Emperor Meiji, guided by reformers, proclaims that Japan will rise as a modern nation, equal to the West. Feudal domains are dismantled, taxes restructured, schools built, samurai stipends are reduced, then commuted into bonds, then abolished altogether. The warrior class, once untouchable, is now pressed to become farmers, bureaucrats or soldiers in a conscript army. Their swords, once badges of pride, are restricted by law. The very symbol of the samurai, the katana, becomes less a weapon and more an heirloom. For many samurai, the humiliation is unbearable. To lose battle is one thing, to lose purpose is another. They wander the streets, their swords clinking softly, their eyes hollow. Some adapt, becoming teachers, policemen, or officials in the new government. Others resist, plotting uprisings in distant provinces, sharpening blades that will never again dominate a battlefield. The Boshin War may be over, but the war for identity has only begun. You sit in a Kyoto tea house and hear their voices, low and bitter. One grumbles that the emperor's advisors care more for foreign uniforms than Japanese honor. Another swears he will never serve in an army where peasants stand beside warriors. A third stares into his cup of sake and whispers that his sons will never know what it means to live and die for a lord. Around them, merchants laugh over ledgers, peasants count their coin, and the irony stings. Those once despised now prosper, while those once exalted fade into irrelevance. And yet, there is resilience, too. Some embrace the new age, seeing in the emperor's rise not betrayal, but opportunity. They believe Bushido, the way of the warrior, can survive as a moral code. Even if the battlefield has changed, they teach discipline, loyalty, and sacrifice, not with the sword but with words, shaping students, soldiers, and civil servants. In this way, the samurai spirit begins to flow into the veins of modern Japan. Invisible, yet enduring, but the divisions remain sharp. The fall of the Tokugawa has left the samurai fractured, some clinging to the past, some adapting to the present, some dreaming of revenge. Their struggle is not simply political, it is existential. For centuries, they were Japan's defining class. Now they are caught between memory and modernity, trapped in a twilight, where their swords gleam, but their power wanes. As you leave the tea house, the streets of Kyoto seem quieter than before. The fires of civil war are cooling, but the embers still glow in the hearts of those who cannot let go. The samurai walk the alleys with the same proud posture, yet each step rings hollow. Their world has collapsed, their future uncertain. The shogun is gone, the emperor reigns, and the path forward belongs not to warriors, but to a nation rushing headlong into modernity. The samurai have not yet vanished, but you can see the shadow falling over them. Their time is ending, not in glory, but in transformation. A transformation that many will resist, some will embrace, and all must endure. The winter of 1877 dawns cold and uncertain, and across the southern island of Kyushu a storm gathers. Saigo Takamori, once a hero of the Meiji Restoration, now stands as its most dangerous opponent. Tall, broad-shouldered, his presence is commanding even in silence. Once celebrated as the embodiment of samurai loyalty, he now leads thousands of disillusioned warriors who can no longer bear the humiliation of reform. For them, the abolition of stipends, the conscription of peasants, and the ban on wearing swords have cut deeper than any blade. Their honor has been stripped away piece by piece, and rebellion is the only answer left. The grievances are everywhere. Former samurai wander the streets of Kagoshima, their families hungry, their swords pawned, their pride broken. Merchants flaunt new wealth while warriors slip into poverty. Young men who once dreamed of serving lords now watch peasants don uniforms and drill with rifles in government barracks. The insult is unbearable. When word spreads that the government plans to seize even the weapons stockpiled in Satsuma, outrage explodes. Sago, reluctant at first, is swept into leadership. His name carries weight, his honor unchallenged. Thousands rally to him, sharpening their katanas, vowing to restore the way of the warrior even if it costs their lives. In February, Saigo's army marches north. At first, their discipline is impressive. Long columns of men in traditional garb stride proudly across the countryside, banners snapping in the wind, their swords gleaming. Villagers line the roads to cheer them, offering rice and sake, whispering that perhaps the old spirit of Japan can yet be restored. But behind the pride lies a cruel truth. They carry blades into a world ruled by rifles. Their valor is immense, their devotion unshakable, but their weapons belong to another age. The imperial army, modern and ruthless, prepares to meet them. Peasants and former merchants march side by side in Western-style uniforms, rifles on their shoulders, artillery rumbling behind them. Their officers, trained by foreign advisors, drill them in tight formations. It is not honor that will decide the coming battles. It is firepower, discipline, and numbers. The samurai, once unchallenged in battle, are now outmatched before the first shot is fired. The clash begins at Kumamoto Castle. Saigo's men lay siege, their swords flashing in desperate charges, but stone walls and modern guns resist them. Cannon fire rips through samurai ranks, the air thick with smoke, the ground littered with bodies. Again and again they charge, voices raised in cries of loyalty, and again they are repelled. For weeks they hold on, but hunger gnaws at their strength, and bullets cut deeper than courage can mend. By spring, the siege collapses, and Seigo is forced into retreat. You follow them into the mountains, the sound of boots crunching on frozen ground, the air filled with exhaustion and sorrow. Once 15,000 strong, his army shrinks with every battle, every ambush. Supplies vanish, morale frayed, yet still they march, still they fight, still they cling to the dream that honor may yet triumph. Seigo himself grows quieter, his face lined with grief. He knows, as his men know, that the end is written, but to surrender would be worse than death. The summer brings final confrontation at Shiroyama. Seigo has only a few hundred followers left, their clothes ragged, their swords chipped, their bodies weary. Across the valley, 30,000 imperial troops prepare for the assault, their artillery and rifles gleaming in the dawn. The contrast is almost unbearable. An army of ghosts facing the machinery of modern war. Seigo's men kneel, tighten their headbands, and whisper farewells. They know they will not survive, but they will die as samurai, blades in hand, eyes unflinching. The cannons open fire at dawn. Shells scream across the sky, tearing through the samurai lines. Trees splinter, earth erupts, men vanish in bursts of smoke and flame. Yet when the barrage ends, the survivors rise. With a great cry, they charge down the slope, swords raised high, their voices carrying across the battlefield. It is the last great samurai charge in history. They crash into rifle fire, bullets cutting them down in waves, but they do not falter. Every step forward is defiance, every strike of the blade a statement that honor cannot be erased by laws or edicts. Seigo himself is struck, wounded beyond hope. Accounts differ. Some say he fell to enemy bullets, others that he asked a companion to end his life before capture. What matters is not the details, but the meaning. His death is the final symbol of an age. With his fall, the rebellion collapses, the survivors cut down or scattered. The battlefield grows silent, the samurai spirit bleeding into the earth of Shiroyama. In Tokyo, the government declares victory. The reforms stand firm, the old privileges of the warrior class are gone, and the path to modernization is secured. But in villages and cities across Japan, the story of Seigo spreads like wildfire. Songs are sung of his courage, plays reenact his final stand, and even those who supported the Meiji reforms find themselves moved by his loyalty. He becomes a paradox, a rebel celebrated as a hero, a defeated man remembered as the last true samurai. Here's your cheekier side. It's as if Japan decided to honor its most famous loser. Imagine a government winning a war, then building statues of the man who fought against it. Yet that is precisely what Japan does. For in Seigo, the people see not rebellion but purity, not defeat but dignity. His death becomes less a loss than a legend, a way for the samurai spirit to live on even as the class itself disappears. The Satsuma Rebellion is crushed, but its shadow lingers. The age of the samurai has ended, yet the values they carried, loyalty, courage, sacrifice, begin to be redefined, woven into the fabric of modern Japan. Bushido is no longer the code of a warrior caste. It becomes the ideal of a nation, a moral compass that outlives the men who first lived by it. You walk across the quiet hills of Shiroyama after the battle, the grass bent beneath the wind, the soil still scarred by cannon fire. The silence is deep, broken only by birds calling in the distance. Beneath your feet lies the end of 1,000 years of history. The samurai are gone, their swords silent, their banners lowered, yet their spirit lingers in the land itself, woven into the stories that will carry them forward. The rebellion has ended, the class has fallen, but the legend has only grown, and in that legend lies the strange truth of their fall. The samurai died not in obscurity, but in such a blaze of defiance that they would never be forgotten. The war in the north ends with smoke drifting over Hakone-dai, but the peace that follows is not the kind the samurai once knew. The new Meiji government wastes no time reshaping the nation. Japan is no longer a patchwork of domains ruled by daimyo and their hereditary retainers. Instead, the land is redrawn into prefectures, governed by officials chosen in Tokyo. Samurai titles remain on paper, but the ground under their feet has shifted. They are no longer the pillars of authority. They are men adrift, their swords symbols without purpose. The emperor's advisors press forward with reforms designed to catapult Japan into modernity. Railways are laid across the land, telegraph lines string from town to town, and factories belch smoke into skies that once echoed only with temple bells. Merchants, long despised, now find themselves at the heart of prosperity. Peasants, once bound to land, see new possibilities opening. And the samurai, their stipends promised for generations, are steadily stripped away. At first, they are commuted into bonds, their value shrinking with inflation. Soon, they vanish altogether. Centuries of inherited privilege dissolve with the stroke of imperial edicts. For the proud warrior class, the humiliation is unbearable. Imagine a samurai whose ancestors rode at Sekigahara, now reduced to begging a merchant for work or pawning his family's sword to buy rice. Some try to adapt, opening schools where they teach Confucian texts, swordsmanship, or etiquette. Others drift into poverty, selling their armor piece by piece until only memory remains. The city streets fill with these broken men, their katanas clinking faintly at their sides, reminders of an honor the world no longer recognizes. Tensions mount as reforms strike at the very heart of samurai identity. In 1871, the government abolishes the domains outright, ordering daimyo to surrender their lands and registers. Samurai are instructed to view themselves as subjects of the emperor, not retainers of local lords. The feudal pyramid collapses overnight. For centuries, a samurai's existence was bound to his clan. Now that clan is little more than a memory, its castle a government office, its banners rolled and stored like relics in a temple chest. The final blow comes with the conscription law of 1873. Every man, peasant or merchant, must serve in the new imperial army. Service is no longer the sole domain of the warrior. Swords at the waist are no longer marks of privilege, but common sights in barracks filled with farmers' sons. The samurai's monopoly on violence has ended, replaced by a merit-based force trained with Western rifles and artillery. The distinction between warrior and commoner dissolves into the grey cloth of uniform. You walk through the streets of Tokyo and see the signs everywhere. Samurai once walked proudly, swords gleaming in their belts, their very presence commanding deference. Now merchants in Western suits stride past them without bowing. Soldiers in conscript uniforms march with rifles slung casually on their shoulders, and the samurai's gaze drops to the ground. Their hands still brush the hilts of their katanas, but the law forbids them from drawing them in public. Even the weapon that defined them is reduced to ornament. And here's your cheeky thought. Imagine a samurai in 1873 grumbling, "I trained for years to master the blade, and now a farmer's son with 2 weeks rifle practice outranks me." It is the original complaint of every outdated profession, though in this case the stakes are identity, not just employment. In some places, resistance erupts. Groups of dispossessed samurai gather in the countryside, polishing their blades and whispering of rebellion. They burn tax offices, assassinate officials, and declare their loyalty to the true way. But the rebellions are scattered, poorly armed, and easily crushed. Rifles mow down sword-wielding chargers, cannons shatter castle walls. Each uprising ends the same way, blood in the dust, a handful of rebels executed, and the message driven home. The samurai era is over. Yet even in defeat, they cling to pride. Many refuse to surrender their blades, wearing them defiantly despite laws that restrict the practice. In the alleys of Kyoto, you see them still, gaunt figures in worn robes, katanas clinking faintly, eyes sharp with resentment. They are ghosts haunting their own time, living reminders of a world dissolving around them. The government presses harder. Edicts forbid the wearing of swords by anyone outside the army and police. Samurai stipends vanish entirely. The class that once stood above all others now finds itself leveled, indistinguishable from commoners in law and status. The transformation is not just political, It is psychological. For centuries, a samurai's life was defined by loyalty, by service, by the weight of the blade at his side. Now stripped of these, many feel hollow, unmoored, lost. But the Meiji leaders see no alternative. To survive in a world of Western empires, Japan must modernize swiftly, and modernization leaves no room for hereditary warriors. Samurai valor has become sentiment. Samurai swords have become heirlooms. Samurai pride, once the heart of the nation, now lingers only in memory. You stand in a Tokyo street as gas lamps flicker to life. Foreigners walk past, their hats tall, their coats long, their language strange. Beside them, Japanese merchants bargain loudly. Soldiers march in grey uniforms. Children run carrying school books. A lone samurai passes, his sword still strapped at his waist. Heads turn, but not in reverence. In curiosity, almost pity. His era is gone, though he still walks in it. The fall of the samurai is not yet complete, but the ground is crumbling beneath their feet. They have lost their lords, their stipends, their privileges, their monopoly on arms. What remains is pride, and pride alone cannot feed a family or resist an empire. In the silence of temples, in the dark corners of inns, they whisper of rebellion. The age of the samurai is ending, but it will not go quietly. The fields of Shirayama are quiet now. The bodies buried, the smoke cleared, and the rebellion ended. But the silence is deceptive, for even as the cannons fall mute, the meaning of the battle echoes through every corner of Japan. The Satsuma Rebellion has been crushed. Saigo Takamori is dead, and the age of the sword has passed. Yet what comes next is perhaps more painful for the samurai than death itself. The slow, relentless unraveling of their identity in a society that no longer has use for them. The Meiji government wastes no time consolidating its reforms. By 1878, swords are banned from public wear for anyone outside the army or police. A law is written in the crisp strokes of brush and ink, but its effect is sharp as steel. The sight of two blades at the waist, once the mark of prestige and fear, is now illegal. Samurai, who once walked proudly through streets with their katanas clinking softly, now must sheath their honor in closets. The clatter of sword hilts against lacquered scabbards vanishes from markets and temples, replaced by the hum of modern industry. For many, the loss is unbearable. The sword was not simply a weapon, it was the soul of the samurai. To wear it was to display status, duty, and readiness for sacrifice. To strip it away is to strip away identity itself. Some resist quietly, hiding their blades beneath robes or wearing them defiantly in remote villages where officials are scarce. Others surrender them reluctantly, wrapping them in cloth and placing them before family shrines as if they were ancestors themselves. More than a weapon, the katana becomes a relic, honored but unusable. Meanwhile, the government pushes forward with westernization. Uniforms replace kimono in official halls. Top hats and frock coats appear on Tokyo's streets, and soldiers march in precise European drills. The very image of the samurai, lacquered armor, proud top knots, twin swords, becomes an anachronism, a costume for festivals rather than a reality of life. Samurai children grow up watching their fathers sink into obscurity, no longer feared, no longer obeyed, no longer needed. Some young men embrace the change eagerly, cutting their hair short, studying abroad, and wearing Western clothes. For their fathers, the sight is bitter, proof that the world they fought for has evaporated in a single generation. You walk through a rural village and see the contradictions everywhere. On one side of the street, a smithy clangs with the sound of plows and shovels, tools for farmers who thrive under new land reforms. On the other side, an old samurai sits outside his home, his sword laid across his knees, staring silently at the horizon. The younger villagers pass him with polite bows, but there is no fear in their eyes, only pity. His authority is gone, but he clings to the weight of the blade like a drowning man clings to driftwood. Some samurai adapt by becoming officials, teachers, or businessmen. They use their literacy, their discipline, and their knowledge of administration to build new roles for themselves. Others become soldiers in the conscript army, swallowing their pride to march beside peasants. Still others become bokum, their swords authorized for law enforcement, but stripped of their former prestige. Each path is a compromise, each one a reminder that their lives are no longer defined by birth, but by the demands of a government that has little patience for nostalgia. And here's your cheeky thought. It's a little like forcing knights of medieval Europe to become office clerks. Imagine a man raised to ride in shining armor, suddenly told he must count ledgers or direct traffic. The humiliation is not in the work itself, but in the collapse of expectation. The samurai trained for war, and war has abandoned them. Yet the irony is sharper still. While the government dismantles the class, it begins to romanticize the samurai spirit. Writers and philosophers elevate Bushido, the way of the warrior, as a moral code for the entire nation. Courage, loyalty, self-sacrifice. These values, once the preserve of a warrior caste, are now preached to school children, drilled into soldiers, and lauded as the essence of Japanese identity. The samurai, stripped of power in life, become symbols in death, their legacy absorbed into the very state that raised them. The transformation is everywhere in daily life. Schools teach ethics drawn from the Bushido code, urging obedience and loyalty to the emperor. Army barracks echo with speeches about samurai courage, even as recruits drill with rifles instead of swords. Plays and novels retell stories of famous warriors, their deaths glorified as models for modern citizens. The samurai as individuals fade, but the idea of the samurai grows stronger, woven into the spirit of a nation that craves both modern power and ancient honor. For the surviving samurai, this paradox cuts deep. They are revered in story, but disregarded in life, their sacrifices honored in words but dismissed in law. Some accept this quietly, content to see their spirit carried forward even as their status is erased. Others fume in bitterness, seeing in the new national cult of Bushido not respect but mockery, a theft of their identity by a government that cast them aside. You walk once more through the streets of Tokyo, now lined with gas lamps and telegraph poles, and you see how complete the change has become. Merchants, once considered beneath notice, drive carriages and wear Western suits. Farmers send their sons to schools, soldiers in uniform salute smartly in the emperor's name. And the samurai? They are shadows, their presence remembered more than felt, their swords gleaming only behind glass in shop windows or tucked into shrines. The city belongs to a new age, and the warrior caste belongs to memory. But memory is powerful. In the quiet of tea houses, old men still tell stories of valor, of battles fought for honor, of deaths faced with calm resolve. Children listen wide-eyed, their imaginations filled with warriors of a time they will never see. And though the laws forbid the swords, the legends cannot be outlawed. The spirit of the samurai lives on not in their bodies, but in their myths, shaping a Japan that will forever carry their ghost within its soul. The fall of the samurai is nearly complete. Their castles are dismantled, their stipends abolished, their swords banned, their privileges erased, and yet as you walk through the temples of Kyoto or the streets of Kagoshima, you feel them still watching from memory, whispering in the creak of floorboards, glinting in the last rays of sunlight on an old katana. They are gone, but not forgotten. Their fall is real, but their shadow endures. The dawn of the 1890s finds Japan striding confidently into modernity, its railways stretching farther, its factories buzzing louder, its navy bristling with iron and steel. Yet in quiet homes and forgotten villages, the remnants of the samurai class still linger, living between memory and irrelevance. They are no longer permitted to wear their swords in public. Their stipends are gone. Their children march in schools beside the sons of peasants and merchants, uniforms erasing the distinctions that once defined Japan. For many, the fall is final, but for others, the struggle to define what it means to be a samurai in this new age continues in subtler ways. In Tokyo, old samurai families clutch to their heirlooms like lifelines. Polished blades gleam in alcoves, lacquered armor hangs untouched in storehouses, and genealogies are recited with pride, even as debts pile high. Fathers tell sons of ancestors who rode at Sekigahara or served Tokugawa lords, stories spoken with reverence but edged with bitterness. The boys listen politely, then leave the house to attend schools that teach Western sciences and mathematics. The tension is stark, heritage cherished in private, erased in public. Meanwhile, a new ideology rises, crafted by intellectuals who see value in the warrior ethos even as the class itself fades. Bushido is codified, written into books and lectures, elevated as a philosophy of loyalty, discipline, and sacrifice. Once a lived code of feudal retainers, it is now transformed into a national ethic, preached not to a caste, but to all Japanese. A soldier conscripted from a rice farm is told he embodies Bushido as much as any samurai of old. A schoolboy memorizing his lessons is urged to show the same devotion as a retainer to his lord. In this way, the essence of the samurai is preserved, even as the men themselves vanish into obscurity. You walk into a Tokyo bookshop and see volumes stacked high, tales of the 47 Ronin, dramatized and embellished, retold for a new audience hungry for national pride. Plays and kabuki productions draw crowds, their stages filled with warriors choosing loyalty over life, honor over compromise. Merchants and laborers cheer from the audience, celebrating heroes their ancestors once feared. The paradox is complete. The samurai who once stood above society are now adored by the very people who used to bow before them. Yet not all former samurai welcome this transformation. In villages across Kyushu and Honshu, discontent still simmers. Men who once carried swords now labor as farmers, resentful of taxes they never used to pay. Their resentment is not simply economic but existential. Their very reason for being has been stripped away. Some drift into gangs using their skills in violence for crime rather than service. Others retreat into isolation, refusing to adapt, their pride calcifying into bitterness. In their eyes, Bushido preached to peasants is an insult, a hollow echo of what once was sacred. The Meiji government, determined to stamp out resistance, doubles down on modernization. The conscription system expands, military academies flourish, and the officer corps is increasingly dominated by men from samurai backgrounds, who chose adaptation over rebellion. In this way, fragments of the class survive, reshaped into tools of the state. Former samurai serve as generals, ministers, and teachers, but always as individuals, never again as a hereditary caste. The collective identity of the samurai is gone, absorbed into the machinery of a modern nation-state. Here's your cheeky aside. Imagine the complaints of a proud samurai father. My ancestors swore loyalty to the Tokugawa shogun. My son swears loyalty to his math teacher. The irony is sharp, but the truth is sharper. Authority has shifted from swords to institutions, from lords to laws. In Kyoto, once the beating heart of imperial intrigue, the temple stands serene, but the samurai patrols that once filled its alleys are gone. Instead, conscript soldiers march in step, rifles glinting under the sun. Civilians watch them with pride, not fear, for they see in these armies the strength of a unified Japan. The people no longer dread the samurai's blade, they celebrate the soldier's uniform. The transformation is cultural as much as political. The nation's guardians are no longer warriors by birth, but citizens by duty. And yet, the image of the samurai grows ever more powerful in the national imagination. The government promotes it deliberately, knowing its value. Samurai ideals become propaganda, rallying cries for unity. Loyalty to the emperor replaces loyalty to the lord, but the language of sacrifice and honor remains the same. The fall of the samurai has not erased their spirit, it has nationalized it. In schools, children recite maxims about devotion, self-control, and duty. Teachers invoke the stories of famous warriors as moral lessons, urging boys and girls alike to embody the spirit of the past in service to the present. The classroom becomes the new dojo, chalk the new sword, and discipline the new armor. Even girls are told to adopt the patience and sacrifice once demanded of samurai wives, their duty now redirected toward the family and the state. You step into a modern army camp and see the paradox in flesh. Officers in Western uniforms drill troops with rifles, their commands sharp, their movements efficient. Yet in their speeches, they speak of Yamato Damashi, the Japanese spirit, rooted in samurai valor. The rifles may be German, the tactics Prussian, but the soul they invoke is entirely Japanese. The samurai are dead, yet their ghost marches in every drill, fires in every rifle shot, salutes in every bow to the emperor. By the 1890s, Japan is no longer the land of daimyo and samurai. It is a centralized empire, hungry to prove itself against the Western powers that once forced it open. The fall of the warrior class has freed the nation to modernize at breakneck speed. Yet in that very process, the samurai have achieved a strange immortality. Their bodies have vanished, their privileges erased, but their spirit has been woven into the DNA of modern Japan. You leave Tokyo at dusk. The streets are alive with electric lamps, the sound of trams rattling through the night. In a quiet side street, you glimpse a sword displayed in a shop window, polished and gleaming, no longer a weapon but an artifact. People stop to admire it, bow slightly, then move on, their pockets filled with coins instead of rice stipends, their hands holding newspapers instead of spear shafts. The sword still shines, but only as memory. The fall of the samurai is complete. Yet paradoxically in their fall, they have risen higher than ever, no longer a class bound by rice and lordship, but a spirit claimed by the nation. Their blades rest in silence, but their myth cuts sharper than ever. The 1880s arrive, and with them a Japan almost unrecognizable from the world of the samurai. Railroads thread across the islands, steamships churn through the harbors, and telegraph wires hum with messages faster than any mounted courier could ride. Tokyo, once Edo, bustles with Western suits, top hats, and gas lamps, glowing along brick-paved streets. Yet even as the nation modernizes at dizzying speed, the question lingers like smoke after battle. What becomes of the samurai when their swords no longer rule? Many have chosen adaptation. Former samurai, literate and disciplined, slip into government bureaucracies, police forces, or the officer corps of the new imperial army. They trade lacquered armor for uniforms, swords for pistols. Their pride may sting, but their talents are undeniable, and the state still needs men of discipline to administer its reforms. For some, this path brings stability, even prosperity. They continue to serve, if not lords, then the emperor and the nation. Yet for every samurai who thrives in this new order, dozens more are left behind. The bonds once issued in place of stipends prove nearly worthless as inflation erodes their value. Old warriors who once lived securely on hereditary incomes now find themselves destitute. Their children work as clerks, their wives sew to earn coin, and their houses crumble around them. Samurai wander city streets with hollow eyes, relics in threadbare robes, their katanas sold to pawnbrokers. In rural villages, you see them laboring in fields they once oversaw, bent under the same sun as the peasants they once commanded. The humiliation bites deeper than hunger, and yet, paradoxically, the image of the samurai grows brighter, even as their lives grow darker. Newspapers publish serialized tales of famous warriors, romanticizing their loyalty and valor. Theater troupes reenact the deaths of legendary figures, drawing crowds eager to glimpse the nobility of an age already fading into myth. Plays of the 47 Ronin, retold with heightened drama, bring audiences to tears. Merchants and farmers, who once feared the samurai, now cheer them on as heroes of the stage. In life, the samurai may be reduced to poverty. In memory, they become immortal. You overhear a conversation in a Tokyo tea house. Two young men in Western suits, fresh from government schools, argue heatedly about the meaning of Bushido. It must guide the morals of our new nation, one insists, sipping his tea. The samurai spirit belongs to us all now, his companion nods, quoting Nitobe Inazo's essays, where Bushido is framed as a philosophy of loyalty, self-control, and sacrifice fit for modern Japan. What was once the code of a warrior caste has been repackaged into the soul of the nation. The irony is sharp. Peasants who once cowered before samurai swords now invoke the warrior's spirit as their own. Meanwhile, the government continues to erase the old distinctions. Sword bans are enforced strictly. Violators face confiscation or arrest. Military service is universal, and promotions are based on merit, not bloodline. The army, drilled in Prussian tactics, salutes the emperor, not the daimyo. The old hierarchy of retainers and lords is dust, and in its place stands a centralized state, humming with factories, schools, and soldiers. For the samurai who dreamed of restoring their privileges, the reality is undeniable. The nation has no place for a warrior class. Yet their legacy refuses to die. Bushido is woven into the fabric of education, taught to children as the ethical core of citizenship. Loyalty, honor, self-sacrifice. These words echo not just in dojos but in classrooms, barracks, and political speeches. The samurai may be gone, but their virtues are claimed by a state eager to channel them into modern patriotism. A farmer's son drilled in rifle practice is told he carries the same spirit as the warriors of old. A merchant's child in school is urged to show the discipline of a retainer. The class has vanished, but the myth has multiplied. You visit Kagoshima, the land of Saigo Takamori, and find his presence everywhere. Statues rise in his honor, plays recount his rebellion, and villagers speak of him with reverence. Ironically, the government that crushed his uprising now celebrates him as a national hero. He embodies the paradox of the samurai's fall, a rebel against the state, yet remembered as its purest servant, a man whose defeat gave birth to a legend too powerful to silence. And here's your cheeky thought. It's as if a government defeated its most dangerous protester, then decided to brand him as their mascot. Imagine Saigo's ghost raising an eyebrow at the statues, muttering, "So you killed me, but now you use my face for patriotism." Even in death, the samurai spirit finds ways to outmaneuver politics. The tension between myth and reality widens as Japan asserts itself on the world stage. In 1894, the First Sino-Japanese War erupts, and conscript armies filled with peasants and merchants' sons defeat the once mighty Qing Empire. Newspapers declare it proof of Bushido reborn, the samurai spirit alive in the rifles of modern soldiers. Yet the veterans of that war return not as samurai but as citizens, rewarded for service, not with hereditary rank, but with pensions and honors available to all. The class system is dead, but the samurai legend breathes life into the nation's victories. In the homes of former samurai, pride and sorrow mingle uneasily. Fathers tell sons stories of their ancestors, their blades hanging on walls as sacred relics. Children listen, wide-eyed, even as they prepare for examinations in Western-style schools. The fathers grumble at the loss of status, but smile faintly when teachers praise Bushido as Japan's eternal soul. They may have lost their privileges, but in myth, their spirit reigns supreme. As you walk through the bustling streets of Tokyo at the end of the 1880s, the transformation feels complete. Horse-drawn trams clatter, shop windows display foreign fashions, and soldiers march with bayonets fixed. The samurai are gone from the streets, their swords vanished from belts, their stipends erased from ledgers. Yet everywhere you look, their shadow lingers in statues, in plays, in speeches, in the quiet pride of families who still polish blades they will never again draw in battle. The samurai have fallen, but they have also risen into legend. Their bodies may be gone, their status abolished, their swords outlawed, but their spirit has been absorbed into the very marrow of the nation. Their fall is absolute, yet their influence endures, haunting and shaping the Japan that replaced them. The 1890s bring triumph and turmoil in equal measure. Japan, once a nation humbled by the black ships, now begins to stride onto the global stage with a confidence that astonishes even its former conquerors. In 1894, the First Sino-Japanese War erupts, and the conscript army filled with farmers' sons, merchants' children, and the occasional former samurai officer marches into battle against the Qing dynasty. The victories are swift, decisive, and shocking. For centuries, China had been the elder sibling of East Asia, the cultural giant. Now Japan's modern army crushes it in months, capturing territory and humiliating an empire. The world takes notice. In the barracks, the rhetoric is clear. Officers invoke the spirit of the samurai as they send men into battle, though the soldiers now wield rifles and bayonets instead of katanas. Commanders tell recruits that they fight with the same courage as the warriors of old, that Bushido lives on in their discipline, loyalty, and sacrifice. The irony is obvious. The samurai as a class are gone, yet their values are shouted louder than ever before. The battlefield, once dominated by swords and banners, now rings with artillery and machine-like drills, but the ghost of the samurai marches with every step. The war's victories, stir pride across Japan. Newspapers print heroic accounts of battles, likening modern soldiers to the famed 47 Ronin. Merchants and peasants, once despised by the warrior class, beam with pride that their sons return as heroes. Even those who never wore a sword now claim to carry the warrior spirit. The myth has transcended the class. Bushido has become not the code of a few, but the ethic of an empire. And yet, for surviving samurai, the pride is bittersweet. In quiet villages, old men polish swords that have not tasted battle in decades. They listen to news of victory, nod in approval, and smile faintly when they hear Bushido invoked. But deep inside, they know the truth. These soldiers are not samurai. Their valor is real, their courage undeniable. But their service is to a nation, not to a lord. The bond of feudal loyalty is gone, replaced by nationalism. The transformation is profound, and for those who lived the old ways, it feels less like survival and more like appropriation. You sit in a Tokyo coffee house and overhear intellectuals debating fiercely. One insists that Bushido is the perfect moral compass for a modern state, a philosophy that proves Japan's uniqueness among nations. Another argues that Bushido is being distorted, turned into a tool for government propaganda rather than a lived code of honor. The discussion grows heated, voices rising above the clink of cups. It is the paradox of the age. The samurai are revered as never before, even as their reality has been erased. Meanwhile, the government doubles down on this myth-making. Schoolchildren memorize tales of samurai bravery, officers receive lectures on loyalty and sacrifice, and newspapers glorify Bushido as the essence of the Japanese spirit. The fall of the samurai has given birth to their resurrection as legend, a legend far more powerful than the men themselves ever were. Once feared, now idealized, the samurai exist everywhere in rhetoric but nowhere in reality. Here's your cheeky thought. It's a bit like turning retired soldiers into superheroes in comic books. The real men fade into ordinary lives, but their myth grows larger than life, a story retold until it outshines truth. The samurai who once struggled to pay their rice bills are remembered as flawless icons of loyalty. History is messy, myth is clean, and myth always wins. The war against China brings territory. Taiwan ceded. Korea opened to Japanese influence. These gains feed national pride, but they also deepen the hunger for expansion. In Tokyo, ministers speak openly of Japan's destiny as a great power. Industrialization accelerates. Railroads multiply, and the military swells. Yet the heart of this expansionist confidence is not factories or rifles, but the claim that the Japanese spirit, inherited from the samurai, makes the nation unique. The sword has been melted into rhetoric, sharpened not on battlefields but in classrooms and speeches. For common people, the transformation is both empowering and confusing. Farmers who once bowed to armored retainers now stand as equals in the ranks of the army. Merchants whose grandfathers feared samurai taxes now profit from contracts supplying uniforms and rifles. Children from every background recite Bushido as if they were born to it. The samurai identity has dissolved into the collective identity of the nation. No longer the guardians of order, the warriors have become the myth that gives order meaning. Yet the old tensions remain. Some former samurai bristle at the glorification of Bushido by those who never lived it. In Kyoto, an aging swordsman mutters bitterly to a foreign visitor, "They sing of our spirit, but they stripped us of our swords." His words capture the contradiction perfectly. The state has taken the values of the samurai and repurposed them, but the men themselves are relics, standing in shadows while their image is paraded in light. At the same time, younger Japanese embrace the myth eagerly. They see in Bushido a bridge between modernity and tradition, a way to reconcile Western science with Japanese pride. Engineers, doctors, and diplomats speak of their work as an extension of samurai duty. Even as the nation builds warships and factories, it insists its heart is ancient. The myth becomes armor for modern ambition. By the late 1890s, the transformation is complete. The samurai as a class no longer exist. Their privileges have been abolished, their swords outlawed, their stipends forgotten, yet their spirit is proclaimed louder than at any time in history. invoked by generals, politicians, and teachers alike. The fall of the samurai has paradoxically given rise to their greatest power, not as men, but as myth. You stand in a Tokyo street at dusk, trams rattling past, shop windows glowing, electric lamps flickering to life. In a bookstore window, a copy of Nitobe's Bushido, The Soul of Japan, lies open, its words declaring the eternal values of the warrior spirit. Passers-by pause, read a line, nod approvingly, and walk on. None of them are samurai, yet all of them believe the samurai live on inside them. The sword has been sheathed forever, but the myth it carried has been unsheathed for the nation. The decades pass, and by the 1920s, the world knows Japan not as the isolated land once humbled by Commodore Perry, nor as the fractured empire of the Boshin War, but as a modern power with factories, colonies, and a formidable navy. The samurai as a living class have long vanished into history. Their swords hang in museums or rest quietly in family alcoves, their armor rusting in attics, their stipends only faint memories, and yet, curiously, the samurai are more present than ever, in words, in images, in ideas. They exist now not as men, but as myth, carefully woven into the story of a rising nation. In classrooms, children open their textbooks to find glowing tales of the 47 Ronin, of Kusunoki Masashige's loyalty, of Saigo Takamori's tragic last stand. Teachers point to these stories not as history lessons alone, but as moral instruction. Loyalty, the children recite, is greater than life. The warrior code of Bushido, once passed through sword practice and lordly service, is now inked into printed pages, simplified into slogans to shape young minds. The classroom has replaced the dojo, and the pen has replaced the sword as the weapon of training. In the army, Bushido becomes a rallying cry. Officers speak of sacrifice for the emperor as the highest duty, echoing the devotion once demanded by feudal lords. Soldiers are told they inherit the spirit of the samurai, even if their fathers were farmers or merchants. Discipline, courage, and obedience are drilled into them with the language of honor. When they march, it is not as conscripts but as modern samurai, heirs to a vanished tradition reborn in uniform and rifle. The paradox is obvious, but effective. The myth of the samurai breathes life into a force that bears none of their blood. Meanwhile, in the wider world, the samurai fascinate foreigners as much as they inspire Japanese. Writers romanticize them as noble warriors, disciplined to the point of myth, loyal unto death. Photographs of samurai armor appear in Western magazines, and travelers to Japan purchase prints of famous battles or duels. The irony is sharp. Foreigners marvel at a class that no longer exists, their admiration feeding Japan's own desire to celebrate what it has lost. The samurai are gone, but global fascination ensures they are never forgotten. Yet, for the few descendants of real samurai families, the adoration rings hollow. They see their ancestors reduced to symbols, their lives simplified into stories of honor and sacrifice, stripped of complexity. A family that once struggled with debts, betrayals, and compromises now finds its history polished into legend. Pride remains, but it is mixed with unease. The samurai have become too perfect in memory, their flaws erased by a nation hungry for heroes. You walk through a Tokyo street in 1925 and see the contradictions everywhere. Banners for kabuki plays depicting samurai tragedies hang beside posters advertising Western films. A bookstore window displays Bushido, the soul of Japan, translated into multiple languages, alongside scientific journals and political tracts. In a department store, cheap replicas of samurai swords are sold as souvenirs. The warrior class has become a commodity, their image bought and sold like silk or sake. The reality of their lives has dissolved into performance. And here's your cheeky aside. Imagine telling a 17th century samurai that, in 200 years, children would be eating sweets, shaped like katanas. He would probably scowl, then eat one anyway, out of curiosity. History has a way of turning the sacred into the sentimental. In rural villages, the transformation is quieter but no less profound. Families who once held samurai status now farm alongside their neighbors, their children indistinguishable from others in school uniforms. Yet inside their homes, relics remain. A sword mounted above the hearth, a scroll detailing service to a long-dead lord, a faded suit of armor tucked away in storage. These are not tools anymore, nor even marks of status. They are heirlooms, reminders of identity that lingers like a ghost. When visitors come, the relics are displayed with pride, but outside, the family is just another part of the modern nation. The government encourages this duality by promoting Bushido as a moral code while erasing the samurai as a class. It preserves the spirit while discarding the structure. Loyalty is no longer to a daimyo, but to the emperor. Sacrifice no longer for a clan, but for the state. The transformation is seamless in rhetoric, but it erases centuries of lived complexity. The samurai are reduced to ideals: courage without doubt, loyalty without hesitation, sacrifice without regret. The myth is useful, and so it endures. As Japan expands into empire, annexing Korea, pressing into Manchuria, the samurai myth marches with it. Soldiers are told they fight not as ordinary men, but as heirs of a warrior tradition stretching back 1,000 years. Victories are celebrated as proof that Bushido makes Japan superior to the West, that samurai spirit can triumph even in modern warfare. Yet beneath the rhetoric lies the same truth that ended the samurai once before. Bullets and cannons, not swords and honor, decide battles. The myth inspires courage, but technology decides outcomes. Still, the myth matters. A soldier charging a machine gun nest may know his rifle cannot stop the fire, but the idea that he carries the samurai spirit steals his heart. A student studying late at night may push harder, believing he follows the path of discipline set by ancient warriors. A factory worker may endure long hours with the same narrative of sacrifice. The samurai are gone, but they have been repurposed to drive an entire society forward. By the close of the 1920s, the transformation is complete. The samurai exist only in memory, myth and metaphor. They are painted on theatre posters, praised in classrooms, invoked in speeches, admired by foreigners, and cherished as relics in family homes. Yet the real men, the ones who struggled with poverty, who bickered with lords, who lived flawed, human lives, are gone. In their place stands an idea, sharper and cleaner than any sword, an idea powerful enough to shape a modern empire. You walk once more through Tokyo at dusk. Neon lights glow beside ancient shrines. Rickshaws share streets with automobiles, and school children march home in uniforms that erase the distinctions of their ancestors. In a shop window, a katana gleams, not as a weapon but as an antique, a memory. Passers-by pause to admire it, bow slightly, and walk on. They see in its steel not a relic of feudalism, but the reflection of themselves. The samurai have fallen, but in their fall, they have risen as something larger than life. No longer men bound by rice and loyalty, they are myths bound to the soul of a nation. Their swords may never again be drawn in battle, but their legend cuts deeper than steel. The 20th century dawns with Japan transformed. Where once samurai patrolled narrow castle streets, now soldiers in Western uniforms march in precise formation. Where daimyo banners once fluttered above wooden fortresses, chimneys rise from factories, belching smoke into the grey sky. Yet even as the old world fades, the image of the samurai is more alive than ever, woven into the very fabric of the nation's new identity. Their fall has given way to a paradox. As a class they are gone, but as symbols they have never been stronger. In 1904, Japan goes to war with Russia, a conflict unthinkable a generation earlier. The Imperial Army, staffed by conscripts from every walk of life, faces the might of the Tsar's empire. Artillery thunders, battleships clash in the icy seas, and the world watches in astonishment as Japan claims victory after victory. For the first time in modern history, an Asian nation defeats a major European power. Newspapers from London to New York shout the headlines, and the West is forced to reckon with Japan as an equal. At home, the victories are celebrated as proof that Bushido still guides the nation. Soldiers who never once wore a katana are hailed as the heirs of samurai spirit. Commanders speak of loyalty to the emperor as the purest form of service. Mothers are told their sons' deaths on the battlefield are noble sacrifices in the ancient tradition of warriors. The irony is sharp. Peasants, clerks, and merchants are dying in trenches, but their courage is framed as the flowering of a spirit once reserved for a privileged class. The state encourages this narrative with fervor. School books describe the samurai as the pinnacle of Japanese morality, their values now the foundation of citizenship. Plays and novels glorify samurai self-sacrifice, drawing parallels to modern soldiers. Even advertisements borrow their image, showing stern warriors endorsing everything from tobacco to sake. The samurai have become cultural shorthand for loyalty, strength, and pride. You walk into a Tokyo theater in 1905 and watch a kabuki retelling of the 47 Ronin. The audience is rapt, their eyes shining with tears as the actors kneel and commit ritual suicide in the name of loyalty. Outside, newsboys cry out the latest reports from the front lines of the Russo-Japanese War, hailing young conscripts as modern Ronin. The connection is deliberate, and the crowd feels it, past and present fused, samurai spirit carried into rifles and artillery shells. Yet, for the few surviving samurai of the old era, this spectacle is both pride and pain. An aging retainer in Kyoto, his sword long forbidden by law, sits quietly in the audience. He weeps at the story, not because it is inspiring, but because it reminds him of what has been lost. He once lived under a lord, bound by oath. His children now work in offices, his grandchildren play with factory-made toys. He knows the state celebrates the samurai in name, while erasing them in practice. For him, the myth is hollow comfort. Here's your cheeky thought. It's as if the samurai have been turned into national mascots. They are plastered on posters, invoked in speeches, dramatized on stage, but the real men who once bore that title sit in silence, unnoticed, their lives shrinking into the background. The state loves the idea of the samurai, not the reality of them. The global stage magnifies this myth. Western writers, fascinated by Japan's rise, romanticize the samurai in travelogues and essays. They describe them as noble, disciplined, mysterious, the perfect contrast to what they see as their own industrial excess. The word samurai enters global languages, shorthand for stoic warriors with unbending loyalty. Ironically, as Japan modernizes to shed its feudal past, the world clings to the romantic image of the very class it abolished. This external fascination feeds back into Japan itself. Intellectuals and politicians recognize the power of the myth, using it to unite a rapidly changing society. Samurai values are presented as proof that Japan can modernize without losing its soul. Factories and warships may be Western in design, but their spirit, the leaders insist, is purely Japanese, forged in the fires of Bushido. In schools, the indoctrination deepens. Children bow to portraits of the emperor, recite maxims of loyalty and obedience, and hear lectures that frame self-sacrifice as the highest virtue. Samurai stories are no longer just entertainment. They are moral instruction. A boy who studies diligently is told he follows the path of the warrior. A girl who endures hardship for her family is praised as embodying samurai patience. The values of a dead class are repurposed to shape an entire generation. By the 1910s, the transformation is complete. The samurai exist only as memory, myth, and metaphor. Their armor is displayed in museums, their swords treasured as antiques, their castles preserved as tourist sites, yet their spirit is invoked daily, in classrooms, in barracks, in political speeches. The fall of the samurai has paradoxically given Japan a foundation for unity in its modern ambitions. You walk through the streets of Tokyo at dusk. Electric lights glow in shop windows, trams rattle along crowded avenues, and Western suits mingle with kimonos. On a street corner, a bookseller displays volumes on Bushido beside translations of Shakespeare and Darwin. A young soldier in uniform passes, rifle slung across his shoulder, and an old man bows slightly, whispering. He carries the samurai spirit. The world has changed beyond recognition, but the myth endures, shaping every step forward. The samurai have fallen, their swords are outlawed, their stipends abolished, their titles erased, but their ghost has been harnessed by the nation, transformed into a legend that fuels its rise. In their death as a class, they have achieved an immortality as symbols. Their fall was real, but their afterlife is powerful. The 1930s and 1940s pushed Japan into a storm that will test how far the myth of the samurai can be stretched and how dangerously it can be wielded. The Meiji state, now transformed into a modern empire, leans heavily on Bushido to justify expansion, sacrifice, and absolute loyalty. What began as the private code of a warrior class has become the state religion of a nation at war. The samurai no longer exist in flesh, but their ghost marches at the head of armies, sails with the navy, and whispers from every propaganda poster. In classrooms, children are drilled daily in loyalty to the emperor. Teachers stand at the front of rooms filled with rows of students in matching uniforms, their voices rising in unison as they recite patriotic slogans. Bushido is taught as fact, not philosophy. To obey without question, to sacrifice without hesitation, to die with honor if called upon. A boy who dreams of science is told his curiosity must serve the nation. A girl who reads poetry is taught that her duty is endurance and support. Every citizen becomes a soldier of spirit, their identity wrapped in a warrior code that once belonged to a small elite. In the military, the rhetoric sharpens. Officers preach that death in battle is not defeat, but fulfillment, echoing the seppuku of old samurai. Kamikaze pilots of the Second World War are told they embody the ultimate act of Bushido, self-sacrifice for the emperor and the nation. The image of the samurai, stripped of nuance, is sharpened into a tool of state ideology. Soldiers march not as conscripts, but as heirs of 1,000 years of honor, even as they are hurled into hopeless battles against overwhelming firepower. Yet for those who remember the samurai as real men, not myths, the appropriation is jarring. In quiet homes, elders whisper that Bushido was never meant to be so absolute, that loyalty once flowed to living lords, not abstract states. They recall samurai who argued, who doubted, who compromised, who lived as administrators, not martyrs. But the state has no patience for such complexity. The past has been simplified, polished and weaponized, turned into a sharp edge pointed outward. You walk through Tokyo in 1941, the city alive with banners and parades, the air thick with slogans about the warrior spirit. Posters show samurai in armor beside modern soldiers, their swords and rifles gleaming together under the rising sun. Shops sell prints of ancient battles as inspiration for the present war. Newspapers praise soldiers as samurai of the skies, or samurai of the seas. The irony is suffocating. The real samurai are long dead, yet their name is stamped on every corner of a militarized society. And here's your cheeky aside. Imagine an old 17th century retainer watching a kamikaze briefing. So, let me understand, you plan to strap yourself into a flying cart, crash into a ship, and call it honor. In my day, we at least expected to swing a sword first. History bends traditions until they serve the needs of the moment. The Pacific War proves the danger of myth. Soldiers, inspired by Bushido rhetoric, fight with ferocity that astonishes opponents. They endure starvation, refuse surrender, and charge machine guns with bayonets when bullets run dry. Their courage is undeniable, but it is also tragic. The same values that once gave the samurai resilience are twisted into tools of destruction, demanding sacrifice without hope of survival. The myth that outlived the samurai has been weaponized, costing countless lives. As bombs fall on Japanese cities, the gap between myth and reality widens. Citizens are told they embody the samurai spirit, yet they cower in shelters as firestorms consume wooden houses. Farmers are urged to work with warrior discipline, yet their fields are stripped bare by requisitions. The code of the samurai, once a personal compass, has become a chain binding an entire nation to sacrifice. In 1945, defeat arrives. Cities lie in ruins, Hiroshima and Nagasaki reduced to ash, and the emperor himself speaks on the radio to announce surrender. The myth of invincibility shatters. For the first time in memory, Japan bows to foreign power. The samurai, long dead in body but alive in spirit, seem to fall a second time, this time as symbols crushed under the weight of modern war. And yet, even in defeat, they are not erased. In the post-war years, as Japan rebuilds under occupation, the samurai return again, not as tools of war, but as icons of culture. Their image fills films, novels, and art. Directors like Kurosawa bring them to life on screen. Their struggles with loyalty, honor, and humanity captivating audiences at home and abroad. The samurai become entertainment, philosophy, inspiration. Once real men bound by rice and swords, they are now universal figures of endurance and dignity. You sit in a Tokyo cinema in 1954 and watch Seven Samurai, the audience holding its breath as weary warriors defend a village with nothing but skill and sacrifice. The theater erupts in applause, and outside, children play at being samurai, swinging wooden swords. The myth has survived yet again, reshaped into something less dangerous, more reflective, more human. The samurai, gone as a class, live forever in story. By the end of the 20th century, the transformation is complete. The samurai exist only as memory, symbol, and art. Their swords hang in museums, their armor in exhibitions, their names in books and films. They are invoked by corporations selling products, by schools teaching discipline, by writers seeking wisdom. They are gone, yet everywhere. Their fall has given them immortality. You walk once more through Kyoto at dusk. The temples glow softly in lamplight, the city humming with modern life. A tourist passes, holding a plastic replica katana. The shop displays ukiyo-e prints of samurai duels. Nearby, an elderly man kneels in a tatami room, polishing a blade that has been in his family for centuries. The steel catches the fading sun, gleaming not as a weapon, but as memory. The samurai are gone. But in that gleam, in that story, in that myth, they endure. The fall of the samurai is final, yet it is also eternal. Their bodies are dust, their class erased, but their spirit has been absorbed into a nation, into a world, into an imagination that will never let them go. The night is quiet now. The clash of battles, the echo of cannons, the cries of loyalty and rebellion have all faded into memory. You sit in silence, the air cool around you, the faint scent of incense drifting from a nearby shrine. A sword lies sheathed before you, its steel resting, its work long done. It no longer needs to cut, to guard, to serve. It is simply there, gleaming faintly in the fading light, as much a mirror as a weapon. Close your eyes, hear the whispers of centuries, the shuffle of sandals on castle stones, the creak of armor in a morning drill, the hushed voices of retainers waiting in a lord's hall. Hear the sudden silence of their end, when the swords were banned, when stipends vanished, when the warrior's place was taken by the march of factories, schools and soldiers in grey uniforms. The sound of the samurai faded, but their echo lingers still. Breathe in slowly. Feel the stillness. The samurai were never just men. They were symbols, carriers of loyalty, honor, sacrifice. Those values flowed outward, reshaped and retold, until they lived not in one class but in an entire nation. And then, in the imagination of the world, they are gone, but not gone. Their swords sleep, but their spirit watches quietly, as steady as a flame in the wind. Let yourself drift with them. Let the noise of history fade into calm. The battles are over. The rebellion's ended. The smoke cleared. What remains is the quiet beauty of endurance. A blade at rest. A story that will always be told. A spirit that will never die. Sleep now, knowing that the samurai have fallen, but their echo will always guard your dreams. Good night. Sweet